Well, hello and welcome once again to the DCL podcast, where we're inviting you to sit back, relax, and we'll be on our way shortly. Well, welcome back to the DCL podcast, your podcast to help you and your family cruise a little smarter when the ships are sailing. And we are going to turn to our Return to Cruising series, kind of looking at different port adventures that are available. And this is a subject, or this is a destination I've long wanted to talk about. I've been able to go there several times myself, usually on layovers when I've been traveling. And we've been lucky enough to have one of our listeners who's been on the podcast before with us, and he has been there a couple times. And now his daughter actually has some artwork associated with the museum on a virtual page. And I'd like to welcome back to the show Dave from Iowa. How are you doing today, Dave?
I'm great. Steve, how are you doing?
Not too bad. Thank you so much for reaching out. And I can't remember how we got on this topic, if you tweeted that you'd been there or not, but this is one of my favorite places.
Yeah, I think that's what it was. I think I had tweeted that I was in San Francisco and going to the museum, and we talked about this a while back, and I'm glad that we can talk about it here on the podcast today.
So we are going to talk about the Walt Disney Family Museum, which is located in the Presidio, which is it used to be an Army base located on the outskirts of San Francisco, and it is just one of the most beautiful places I think I've ever been. What were your thoughts of the Presidio, Dave?
Yeah, you summed it up exactly right, where it's so beautiful, right? It's, for me, when I'm in a big city, especially San Francisco, after a couple of days of being there, like the hustle and the bustle of the city and the noise and the congestion, it starts to get to me a little bit. And I love going up to the Presidio because it's one of the few spaces in San Francisco City where there's this green space, this open spaces. The architecture is different there because, like you said, it was our Army barracks in the past, and just a beautiful area, a great view of the Golden Gate Bridge, assuming there's no fog in the bay. It's a wonderful area. I love spending time up there.
I think it's like one of those spaces that I'm really glad. It's probably kind of like Central Park in New York. And we have in Portland here, we have a park as well that runs along the north part of the city where there's just a lot of hiking trails. And I think this is one of those spaces for San Francisco that I'm so glad that when they closed the Army base, they did not, no offense to anybody out there's, into, what do I say, construction or whatever else. But I'm glad they did not sell off this property and turn it into, either homes or businesses or whatever else. So
yeah. I mean, it's a national park now, and so hopefully it kind of stays that way for a while, and we're glad that the Walt Disney Family Museum opened up there.
So let's kind of look at, but before we talk about what the Walt Disney Family Museum is, you can actually visit the Walt Disney Family Museum while on a Disney cruise. The Disney Wonder cruises up and down between San Diego and Vancouver when it transitions up to Alaska each year in the fall, and hopefully, or in the spring and the fall, and hopefully that's going to happen again this year. The next cruise that you can actually, where she will stop in San Francisco if it goes, is May 12th of 2021. And then once again, this year, for whatever reason, they're not going to stop in the fall of 2021 coming back. They're going to Victoria, British Columbia, and stopping there instead of San Francisco. And so then the other cruise will be April 21st, 2022, where you can actually get off in San Francisco, explore that beautiful city, and one of the options is to go to the Walt Disney Family Museum. And, I'm just going to throw this out here now. The prices are kind of crazy. I think this is one of those ones that you could probably do it yourself. It gives you 4.5 hours there, but boy, the Presidio is such an amazing place that, in the museum, as we'll talk about, you could spend a lot of time there, right, Dave?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And on the pricing too, I crunched some numbers before we got on the call here. And, for our family of 5, if we happen to be on that cruise and booked through Disney, I think the cost for us would be about $415 because everyone in our family is above the age of 10. If we just, go to the museum, pay the tickets there, or pay for the tickets there, it's $95. So that's like a 77% decrease in cost. And, you have to pay for transportation. Some of that cost is like the insurance and the safety of booking through Disney. When we went to the Western Caribbean, we wanted to book all of our excursions through Disney just because we hadn't been out of the country before. We weren't comfortable doing that on our own. But maybe that's because I've been to San Francisco a few times, but I feel like it's pretty easy to navigate, and I feel like most people would be totally comfortable being able to kind of do this one on their own and save a pretty big chunk of cash.
Definitely. I think it would be easy to Uber. Well, I know that I have Ubered to the Walt Disney Family Museum on my layovers. It's pretty easy to get an Uber there, so you could do that as a family. There is a bus. There's a free shuttle that actually leaves near the Embarcadero, which is down pretty close to Fisherman's Wharf and where the Disney Wonder parks. So you could take the free bus, but I probably would recommend maybe taking an Uber there. You don't want to Uber back, though, because there are no real Ubers hanging around the park. I think that'd be a little bit harder, but there is a free bus that runs probably every 20 minutes that takes you back down to the Embarcadero, and I think that's how I would do it.
Yeah, I think that's a great option. You know, one other option that I'll throw out there too, which is what I did last time I went to the museum. Again, not there for a cruise. I was in San Francisco for a work conference. You know, if you have a party that's able to do this age-wise and health and everything, there are electric scooters littered all over San Francisco, and you can pick one of those up. You can use an app on your phone, get the scooter, and ride all the way up to the Presidio. About to the edge of it, they won't let you take the scooter into the Presidio by the museum. They want to keep that green space pretty open. But you can take it about to, like, I would say a half mile away from the museum, and then just walk up that last half mile. And I think that's a great way to get there because it allows you to see some of San Francisco, right? If it's your first time there, you're going to go right by Fisherman's Wharf. You're going to go along the coast and get to see a lot of the sites that it's basically the same path that the bus would take if you book through Disney. And you get to see the same things, but you can stop and actually move around and look at the sites up close. So that's a great way to get there as well, is an electric bike or an electric scooter.
Yeah, I would love to do that myself. Well, before we talk about the museum, so the museum actually doesn't own a building. They rent or lease a building in the Presidio itself. As we talked about, it was a prior military base there. There are a lot of other different organizations within the Presidio itself. There's a really good museum of the Presidio, how it was founded, and the military influence, and a little bit, and a cafe up there as well. That's one museum, but also Industrial Light and Magic is there. Did you know that?
I had heard that. I haven't made it over there before, but I didn't know that was there. Yeah, is that where is there like a Yoda statue? Is that where that is?
Yeah, and so I've seen the statue, but I don't think that there's any way to get any type of tour. I don't think they have like a museum or anything like that. But yeah, and I'm not sure exactly if that's their headquarters. I'm not sure if it's their headquarters, but I do know they have some offices there. So kind of a neat component there that's at the Presidio as well. You know, now I'm thinking about it, I read Steve Jobs' book, and there's a whole story as how they got there to the Presidio, and it's kind of escaping me right now. But
you know what? I've read that too, and I don't think I connected. I didn't even know what the Presidio was when I read that.
Yeah,
when that came out. But you know, I would also recommend too, if you are going there, the Presidio has a website, and you can check out to see what they have to offer. And we happened to the first time I went with my wife. We went out to San Francisco we went to California to go to Sonoma. Flew in through San Francisco, and on the drive up to Sonoma, we said, well, let's stop at the museum, visit that for the first time. And we looked at the Presidio website, and they just happened to be having some event there that had all these food trucks lined up. And it was kind of like almost like a food and wine type situation where we came to the Presidio. It was lined with food trucks. We could just walk around, sample a whole bunch of different food, and then go to the museum. And so I know that the Presidio has events that they regularly hold, obviously when COVID is not ravaging the world. And so if you happen to be going during that time, check their website, and you may be able to get kind of a 2-in-1 where, you know, some events going on at the Presidio, you can do that and then head to the museum as well.
That would be awesome. So let's turn to what the museum actually is and maybe what it isn't. Are you a Walt Disney historian, Dave? Is that something that really interests you? I'm guessing it does because you went there just like I did.
Yeah, I that's not officially in my resume, Walt Disney historian, but it is something that it's one of my hobbies, is learning about Walt Disney the person. There's a great biography by Bob Thomas that I've read a couple times, and I love learning about the history of Walt, especially as someone who lives in the Midwest, knowing that he has, you know, ties here to Kansas City, which is just a couple hours south of where I am, and also Chicago, which is just a few hours east of where I am. And so I love learning about the history of Walt Disney, and that's one reason why I love the Walt Disney Family Museum so much.
Have you been down to Marceline?
I have not. It's been on our list to do, and I don't know why we haven't, because it's so close to where we are, but it's definitely somewhere we need to get to.
I know they have another museum down there that I guess is supposed to be pretty spectacular as well. Well, the Walt Disney Family Museum was founded. It serves a lot of different purposes, but it was founded by Diane Disney Miller, who she was one of Walt's daughters, and it really is a museum that kind of wants to keep alive who Walt Disney the man was, I guess, is kind of what I took away from it. How about you, Dave?
That's exactly right. It's really, she started it. Originally, people wanted her to write a book about her father. And she said, I see your book and I raise you a museum. And so her and her son, Walter Elias Jr., started the museum as a way to honor her father's legacy. And I do think it's important to point out that this is actually not owned by the Walt Disney Company. It's the Walt Disney Family Museum, not the Walt Disney Company Museum. And I love the Disney Company. I love what they stand for. I love what they represent, who they are. But what I love about the Family Museum is that you get a little bit different perspective on Walt. It's not kind of through the lens of, corporate Disney. You get a little bit different perspective on his life and his legacy.
The other thing I think that's pretty amazing is it's 10 different galleries that encompass his entire life. And it was an opportunity for them to take a lot of, just kind of his parts of his legacy, I guess. There's letters, there are his skis. He was a skier, and those you can see those there. But it was an opportunity to take, what's the word I'm looking for? A lot of his personal possessions and the family's possessions and put them on display to explain who he was.
And you get that sense, right, when you enter, and you pay for your tickets and you go in kind of this welcome lobby, and it really sets the stage for your whole experience, because what you have is his professional accomplishments, right? They have, I think it's like the largest collection of Oscars in one place in the world outside of Hollywood or something like that. There's like 26 of his Oscars there. And you have other awards other achievements and awards that he gained throughout his career. So you have these professional accomplishments, but they're set alongside his personal artifacts and these things that are very personal to him about his family. And those two are set right next to each other. And it really sets the stage for what you experience through the museum, which is the professional work that he did alongside something that was incredibly important to him, which was his family.
Before we go into the museum itself, and we won't go room by room, but we'll touch on kind of like the flow of the museum and maybe talk about some of the exhibits that we like, some of the things that we saw that are pretty exciting to see. We won't give all the spoilers away, but let's touch on some of the other things that are available at the museum itself as you walk in. You talk about the entrance there, Dave, but there are a lot of other things going on as well. And as you were talking about the Presidio, you can go to the waltdisney.org site, and that will give you all the other information of things going on. I know down in the basement, a lot of times they have other special exhibits going on. That's also where they have weekly and sometimes daily film showings. Did you guys stop and see a film by any chance?
We haven't been there during those times for the filming. Yeah, you're right. They have filming, they have workshops, talks by animators, Imagineers, people who are connected in some way to Walt's life. I think what's really cool right now is that they're offering a lot of those virtually, for a small fee. You can pay a small fee and do some of those different talks and listen to some classes from, again, animators, Imagineers, and other people.
If you join the museum, it's about $100 for a year for one person to join. All of those presentations are actually provided to you for free too, which is kind of cool because to be completely honest, not living in San Francisco, it's tough to go there for, change your life around just to go to a presentation. And it's actually very difficult to get tickets to. So they've had some pretty amazing artists and Imagineers like Didier Guez that will come and talk and talk about his experiences working for the Walt Disney Company. And now, like you were saying, those are all online. So either for a small cost or if you're a member, you can actually watch those for free. So I've not seen one of the films either. Usually, a lot of times they'll show things, based on the season. I know there's a kind of a family Christmas film, which I would love to see that they show in December, which is kind of a lot of old, I think it's like about a 45-minute documentary of old family films during Christmas time with Walt and his family, with Diane, which I think that would be kind of neat. But the films kind of rotate through, and so they've always got something going on there. They usually have one of the docents that will kind of give you a breakdown of why the film was made, a little bit of the history of the film before the film starts, so that's kind of neat. And then a lot of times during the year, they have big bigger exhibits too, where there's a separate building out back where they will put on special exhibits. I'm a huge World War II buff, and they were supposed to have a World War II kind of special exhibit talking about the Walt's experiences and the studio's experiences during World War II, but that has been put on hold. So were there any of those special exhibits going on when you were there?
The first time I went, I don't remember what the exhibit would have been, but when I went in 2019, they had a Mickey Mouse exhibit that was going on. And I think, if you buy tickets through the Family Museum, it's like an extra $10 usually. It depends on the exhibit. The prices will vary a little bit, but I think at that time it was for like 10 more bucks you could add on the Mickey Mouse exhibit. And for me it was I had lack of time. I only had a couple hours to spend there, and so I wasn't able to go through that exhibit.
Okay. And then the last two things that I guess we could touch on that they have there, they've got an amazing gift shop. I find myself kind of just wandering around there. They have so many different things in there that you don't find anywhere else.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That's actually, I made some notes on what are some of my highlights of the Family Museum, and the gift shop is one of them, which seems a little bit odd to have a gift shop as a highlight, but it's like any good Disney ride, you exit through the gift shop, right? You get done with your tour of the museum and you come into this gift shop. I think you can actually access it without, going through the full tour of the museum as well, but they have just some amazing things that you would not normally find at a gift shop in a Disney park or on a Disney cruise line. Lots of great books by Imagineers, people connected to Walt's life in some way. They have the e-ticket magazines from the 90s, which are now out of print. I don't know if you've ever picked up one of those. I got a Pirates of the Caribbean one last time I was there. Have you ever bought one of those before?
Yeah, I picked up one of my favorite rides is the Haunted Mansion, so I picked up the Haunted Mansion one.
Yeah. Same for me. It's my favorite ride is Pirates, and so that's the one I got.
And those are amazing. I wish they still did those. Maybe you can only write about Pirates or the Haunted Mansion so many times, but it was some really cool pictures in history about the different rides.
Yeah, those are a lot of fun. And then on top of that, they just have unique souvenirs. Some that are unique to the Walt Disney Family Museum, but then others that you're not going to find on the Disney website or in the Disney parks at all. So it's a great gift shop.
And that's a good point there. You can actually access the shop through the waltdisney.org site as well, so you can buy some of the stuff through that. And then the last thing they have is they have a small little cafe. I've actually eaten there, believe it or not. I wasn't there when they had the food and wine thing going on outside, so I actually ate at the cafe there.
Yeah, so the first time we went was the food truck situation. The second time I was by myself and I needed some lunch, and I think I got a panini at the cafe, and it was actually pretty good. It was a good sandwich, and that's a great option if you're going there, around lunchtime. You need to grab a quick bite to eat. There's not a ton of seating in the cafe. I think there's only a couple tables, but there's benches outside, along with all that green space in the Presidio where you can, if you want to, you can have a little picnic out on the grass there. I think that would be a great little lunch to do before you tour the museum.
Well, let's turn to the museum itself, Dave. And you've kind of put together the 10 rooms. We can kind of walk through this a little bit and touch on maybe a highlight that we enjoyed from each and every one of them. But after you go through the main lobby, you walk in and you start off with Walt's kind of history back in World War I, and I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, you get to learn about some of his experience in World War I, and then his experience in the Midwest as a kid, in Marceline and Kansas City and Chicago. This is where he created Laugh-O-Grams Studios, which that building actually still exists in Kansas City, and you can visit it. It's kind of a dump, but it's cool to see. And, you have his failure that happened in Kansas City with Laugh-O-Grams, which is what led him out west to Hollywood in 1923. And this is actually one of my favorite parts of the museum is the elevator ride up, because you have his early life, you have his failure that he experienced, and then you get on the elevator and you get to hear Walt's voice talking about his trip out west. And you come up, the doors open to the elevator, and here you are in his early work once he made it to Hollywood.
And I guess it would be a spoiler to tell you how the elevator is decorated, but we'll just leave it at that. I'll let it be a surprise for people as they walk into the elevator.
So, you come out the elevators and you're into some of his early work from Hollywood. So this is going to touch on, things with Oswald the Lucky Rabbit, the creation of Mickey Mouse with Ub Iwerks, and just some of the early days of the studios. And you get to see a lot of really cool artifacts, some early, I think they have one of the earliest known drawings of Mickey Mouse. And so just really some really cool stuff that you can see from those early Hollywood days.
I liked a lot of the toys and the merchandise that they were actually, building at that time as well, which they have throughout that room. So you can kind of see like the progression of Mickey from the very beginning, like you said, not just in a drawing, but also in some of the toys that were being made as well.
The Mickey mania that took off in the 20s and 30s. That, some of those toys are a little creepy. I can't imagine kids playing with some of them, but yeah, I love that display. It's a really cool one.
So from there, you kind of go into, if I remember right, you start looking into his films and kind of not the films necessarily, but the cartoons themselves as you walk into the next room. And playing is the Old Mill film, which I find fascinating. I've never watched it. Now with Disney Plus, I'm not sure if it's on Disney Plus. Do you know?
I think it is. I think the Silly Symphonies are on there, if I remember right.
Okay, so they start to touch on that, and they've got video of a couple of the different ones, so you can actually sit there and watch and listen to them.
This section is about those early, once you kind of get past Steamboat Willie and the early days of Mickey, it goes into the adoption of color and in their pictures, the Silly Symphonies. This is where they start to talk about Snow White and some of those early films. And what I think is cool here is this is where they show you, they actually have on display that the multiplane camera, which is what gave the depth to those early films like Snow White. And if you're not familiar with it, the multiplane camera was an invention that it's this 2-story contraption with a camera on top. And then if you imagine as you work your way down this contraption, there's panes of glass with different backgrounds painted on them. So as the camera focuses down through those panes of glass, you get this illusion of depth that happens. And they have, I think there's 3 in existence today, and they have one of them at the museum, and you can see it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing because you can see it in that room, the top part of it. And I think it's when you are down in the actual,
I think it's a gift shop, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, when you're actually in the gift shop itself, you can see the bottom part of it. See, I mean, it's a huge contraption.
Yeah. So that's that room with some of the early films, the early feature films that you see. And that kind of continues. There's a couple more rooms that talk more about some of the feature films like Fantasia and Pinocchio. And then you get into some of his patriotic contributions. After you go through the feature films room, you have some of the patriotic contributions from World War II, the work with traveling down to South America, which gave us a lot of attractions and artwork and feature films that came later from their experience in South America.
So I want to go back just a little bit because not only are they talking about kind of his arc and history through the Walt Disney Company itself and the films that he made, but within these rooms as well, they start to also touch on kind of his life, and you see the birth of his daughters. You see the fact that he and his wife and Roy Disney and his wife were travelers. They skied up in the Sierra Nevadas and several different places. They traveled to Europe. So on top of just his life with the company, they're also in a different part of each room. They're kind of showing you what is going on with his family life as well.
And that's set up in the beginning of here's the professional accomplishments alongside, what's happening in his family. And that's something that's really special that you get to see these photos and these videos and these artifacts that you're not going to see anywhere else.
Right. So after the World War II, and I do want to say they do touch on the strike from the Disney company as well.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's a big part of it there, too. And that, that affected Walt a lot personally and professionally, this animator strike that happened. I know that was something that he carried with him for the rest of his life. According to the biography, that's something he really carried with him for a long time. And so that's a huge part of his life, and I'm glad they take some time to touch on that.
One of my favorite rooms after the World War II section is you walk into a film or into a room where they touch on a lot of the original movies like you were talking about, and they show different scenes from Peter Pan to The Jungle Book to a lot of the other ones. Can you talk a little bit about that room, Dave?
So like you said, Peter Pan, Cinderella, Lady and the Tramp, Alice. So this is kind of like the time period here to frame it a little bit is 1946 to 1950. And that's actually important to call out. We didn't talk about that at the beginning, but the progression is it's kind of a timeline through his life. And so as you go through the rooms, it's different. You can see here's a different time period we're in now. And so the post-war room is 46 to 50. And it talks about the different animated films that we just mentioned. But also this is where they start to get into some of the live action films. So you get to see some cool early artwork from 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. and I just watched that for the first time actually about a year ago, and it actually holds up pretty well. It's, some of the acting is kind of ridiculous, but I was thoroughly entertained on my plane ride when I watched 20,000 Leagues.
I'm going to have to watch it. I just recently watched The Swiss Family Robinson, and I really enjoyed that one as well. So
yeah,
I'm going to have to go back and watch 20,000 Leagues. Well, from there, you kind of step into a room with his miniatures. If you've read anything about Walt, he was a collector of miniatures, and so they've got a room dedicated towards that.
I like this. This is like almost like a pass-through room, right? You're just kind of, it's like you're leaving one exhibit, kind of going to the next. And so it's meant to it's a small little room, but you're right. It has his miniatures. Walt had his hobbies. He loved trains and he loved miniatures. And around this time, he had even considered putting his miniatures into a diorama, putting them on a train, and then touring the country with them. And the name of that was going to be Disneylandia. But thankfully, I think he realized maybe that's not, a viable option for an attraction. And so he kept developing a little bit. And eventually we're going to get to the point of Disneyland.
Yeah, I never really put that two together. Disneylandia, you walk through that. And then from there, the next thing you see is?
Well, then you go through a hallway. I love this hallway here. So on the right, you have Walt in the natural world. And I actually never even look at those because I'm always looking in front of me and to the left. To the left is a big glass wall with a straight shot view of the Golden Gate Bridge in the bay. So again, as long as it's not foggy, you have a beautiful view of the bridge. But then at the end of that hallway, straight ahead of you, is a bench taken from Griffith Park. And that was kind of the next inspiration for Disneyland, is Walt's experience taking his daughters to Griffith Park, sitting on the bench, watching his daughters play and thinking to himself, dang it, I can do this better than what they're doing here. I can create something that's better than this. And so you take the miniatures and you take the experience of Griffith Park, and those two kind of fuse together. And that's when you come around the corner and you start to see Disneyland really coming together.
Yeah. And before you see that, what I think is pretty amazing too is the train. They've actually Yeah, the recreation of the train he had in his backyard with his his love for trains. You have the model of the Carolwood Pacific running around the top, and that's pretty fantastic. So as you kind of go through there, like you said, you start to get the idea of Disneyland, and I think this is probably one of my favorite exhibits that they have there. I know a lot of people talk about it. It's interesting to see the. I'm not sure when it was made, but they actually have a model of the concept of Disneyland.
Yeah, they do. They have that miniature model. Well, I'll call it miniature because the attractions are miniature, but the model is huge. You can walk all the way around it. And I don't know if it was made a long time ago and then had additions, because it has things like, if I remember right, Pirates is in there, and Pirates was not it was not originally built when Disneyland was created. And so I don't know if they added things or if they built it later, but either way, it's a really cool model that you can stand over, walk around, look at of Disneyland. And just like you, this is one of my favorite areas. And this is the area that, I tend to spend the most time in when I'm there, looking at all the early Disneyland artifacts from those early days. I love this area. And it's really the coming together of, or the payoff of everything that you've just seen, right? It's his hobbies with miniatures, with trains, his experience in wanting to create entertainment for families, and his value that he placed in the family. And then also just all of his professional work with animation. And all that's kind of coming to a head right as he's creating Disneyland. And that's the payoff of everything. And it's a great, this is my favorite gallery to walk through.
Oh, it's amazing. And like you said, they actually have in Frontierland, they have the mule train, so the actual mules that you would ride, and they show the pathways there. But like you said, so I'm not sure that it's a specific time frame. I think it's kind of is an amalgam the right word of several different eras, but more at the beginning of Disneyland than today. It's nothing like today, if that makes any sense. So.
Right. You're not going to see Galaxy's Edge there. You're going to see the old Fantasyland, the mule ride, things like that. Yeah.
And one of my favorite things actually is the Autopia car. They've got one of the original Autopia cars that was in Disneyland.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. You don't get sick off the exhaust fumes like you do when you're in Disneyland, which is a plus.
You know what? I have a special spot for Autopia, I guess, because I get the boy. It's a huge. Or this is a whole like side note, isn't it? I get the fact that it takes up so much space, but when you're a little kid. I mean, I remember watching my kids, like that was one of their favorite rides to go on, to be able to go and actually drive a car. And when they could do it themselves, like that was like a big deal. And so you and I kind of take it for granted. You know, we drive cars all the time. So why do I want to go drive a car? But as a kid, I think it's still just an amazing experience for him.
Yeah, I agree. I love that one. And, you know, after you see the Autopia car, you get to experience some of his work with television, which was a huge part of why Disneyland was successful, which was their contract with ABC. You know, before social media, where they could send out scheduled tweets of, you know, here's our press release. They used their broadcasts on ABC to highlight what was happening in Disney. And so you get to a section that talks about Walt's work with television, which is groundbreaking in a lot of ways. And then you get to see some animatronics, which, you know, this is another big part of what we know as Disneyland and Disney World, and really Disney parks today, is the audio animatronics. And that came about from the 1964 World's Fair. You know, that's where you get things like Mr. Lincoln, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, Small World. And that came from that 1964 World's Fair. And so you get to see some audio animatronics. You know, some of them look a little almost like Terminator. You know, you get to see the inside of the animatronic. But they have some of the displays there, I won't give it away, but they're a little more interactive, where you can kind of interact with the audio animatronics. And I really like that section as well.
They touch a little bit on Mary Poppins and one other film, too. I can't remember which the other one is that they touch on through that section.
I remember Mary Poppins being there. I don't remember what the other film is. But, you know, at this point, then, again, timeline, you're starting to get towards the end of his life. This is, you know, 1950, 1965. And so there are some highlights of the Florida Project, which eventually became Disney World and Epcot. You get to see some artwork from Mary Poppins, like you said. But really, at this time is when his health starts to decline, and that kind of takes you then into the last gallery here.
And I think that's what's pretty amazing is, you know, they talk about the company. You kind of get to see his life through the museum as well, how it transgresses. But at the end there, they really focus on him, and that he was a human. I think I hear this from a lot of people. You and I, you know, we've read books, so we associate Walt Disney with the man, but I know a lot of, you know, people don't really associate Walt Disney that he was a man. I remember, I'm going to date myself, I remember watching the TV shows as a kid and seeing, I mean, these were created well before my time, but they were on TV, and you would get to see him, you know, introduce the show, whether it was either a nature back show or whatnot. But I like the fact that they end it kind of just touching on his humanity.
I agree. And, you know, for me as a kid, I grew up with Michael Eisner introducing movies, right? He to me was the face of Walt Disney, and it wasn't until I got a little bit older that I realized, you know, Walt was an actual person. And if you go to the Walt Disney Family Museum website, there's a video that talks about kind of why they started the museum, and it has Diane Miller, and she says that exactly, where, you know, so many times that people forget that Walt was a person. He was a person that created this, along with many other people who assisted him along the way. But he's not just this corporate entity. He was a person who walked this earth and created all this that we get to experience today. And that last section, it's pretty moving. If you're a fan of Walt Disney, you know, that last section that talks about his legacy and the impact of his life and really of his death on the world when that happened, it's a pretty moving area to walk through. But for me, I always leave that area with this feeling of inspiration and hope, right? It's like every time I visit the museum, I leave and I'm like ready to take on the world, right? I want to do my job better. I want to be a better husband. I want to be a better father, right? And so it's like this, you leave feeling inspired after you get to walk through the legacy of his life.
That's funny. I wonder how many people feel that way, because I feel the same way as far as just being inspired is. And we don't want to give away. I want you guys to be able to experience that last section yourself, because I think everybody will probably have different thoughts. But I, like you, kind of felt the same way. I feel inspired to go out and make the world a better place if we can.
Yeah, for sure. That's if you can walk away with that from any experience, that's a great thing to walk away with.
So just an amazing museum. It hits on so many different notes, but I think it does it really well. And even though you've been there twice, and I'm sure you'd go back again, wouldn't you?
Oh yeah, yeah. If I find myself in San Francisco, which I somehow find myself there every couple of years for some reason, if I'm there again, I will make it to the museum. And you can easily spend a couple hours there, walking through the museum and going through the special exhibits as well.
And there's always something I found the couple times that I've been there too. You're always going to find something new, some other little nugget that you hadn't seen, or a different angle to his life that you're going to find. So, well, one of the things that we haven't really talked about is one of the main. The Walt Disney Family Museum is a nonprofit, and one of its biggest goals is to actually help people create art. They have a lot of different classes that they have there for kids, for I believe even up to adults can go and attend. And right now, I think you've got something pretty special to talk about, Dave.
Yeah, they the Walt Disney Family Museum put out an all call for artwork inspired by Small World, and this came about, I think, really after a lot of the events of 2020, especially over the summer, with a lot of just unrest that was happening in our country. And they wanted to create an exhibit that put forth the message of Small World. And so our oldest daughter, submitted a piece for it, and it was selected, which is super cool. So now, if you go on to the Walt Disney Family Museum website, you can do a virtual tour of the Small World exhibit. And I think it's a virtual rendering of the Diane Disney Miller building, if I'm not mistaken. And you can click through. It's kind of like using Google Street View, right, where you can kind of click through and go to the point in the room that you want to go to. Yeah, our daughter's piece is up on the second floor, and we're honored that she was selected to do it. And it's a great honor for her to have her artwork featured in there. What
kind of art did she produce, or what is her picture?
Yeah, so she did a recreation of, how do I explain it? So she used construction paper, like construction scrap paper. That was something that was actually really important to her because of her views on taking care of the earth. She wanted to use recycled materials, so she used scrap paper to put together a picture that's really inspired by the artwork of Mary Blair. She has a Mary Blair book on her desk that who was the artist that really created the feel of Small World. And so, inspired by Mary Blair, she created this construction paper piece of art that has different kids from different nationalities, different abilities, and highlights them together. And I'm trying to remember what her little description said, because it was special. I think it was something along the lines of, when I created this piece, I wanted to reflect on the fact that no matter what our differences are, that we're better together. And so that's what the piece reflects, is people from different backgrounds being together. So pretty special.
What a poignant time to have an exhibit like this with everything that's been going on. And I'm just clicking on it as you're talking, and it's free. You don't have to actually pay for it. So you just go to the website and you go on, and it's pretty simple to use. You follow along with these little circles on the ground that'll take you to the different pieces, and then you can click on the artwork itself. It gives a description of it. It tells who the artist was and how they did the work itself. So in other words, like one of them I'm looking at, it says acrylic on stretched canvas, so much that we share. And this one was produced by Alex Roussel of Louisiana. So just an amazing exhibit. I encourage everybody to go and take a look at this exhibit. It's just pretty amazing.
Yeah, like I said, easy to navigate, and I just think it's really cool that it wasn't just local artists in San Francisco who created this. It was people all over the country, maybe all over the world, and it's people of all ages. There's kids, there's adults in there that all created this artwork, all created these pieces of art, and I think it's a great exhibit.
Do you know how long it's going to last? That's the one thing you didn't say.
Yeah, they did not say. I think the last virtual exhibit they had up for a few months. So I'd imagine it would be up for a few months. I don't know if that will change once the museum opens up and they're able to actually hold, have events again. I don't know if that stuff will come down then, but I'd imagine it'll be up for maybe a couple more months.
So as I'm looking at it too, I'm realizing that this virtual tour is actually in the building which is behind the Walt Disney Family Museum, where they have a lot of the special exhibits, so like that Mickey Mouse exhibit. So it's actually a recreation. The artwork is being hung up in kind of a recreation of that building, which is super cool.
Yep.
I guess as we kind of finish up today, Dave, what advice is there anything that we haven't talked about, or any other advice that you'd have or give to people who are thinking about visiting the Walt Disney Family Museum?
Yeah, I would say, if you're someone who enjoyed walking through One Man's Dream at Hollywood Studios, I think you'll love this. One Man's Dream is like a kind of a 10-minute congested version of this, where you can easily spend a couple hours here, like I said earlier. And if you're interested at all in the history of Walt Disney, I would highly encourage you to go to the Walt Disney Family Museum. I think it's probably more likely that your listeners are going to be in San Francisco for a reason other than a cruise, just because there's not a lot of cruises that port in San Francisco. So if you find yourself in the area, make an effort to try to make it up there. And I wanted to give one little I don't know, extra magic, I'll call it, of something that I think would be a really cool experience. And it's actually two different things that I've done. So I haven't done this together, but I think it would work. I think you can do this together. And so what I wanted to throw out there was, I've been in the museum and I've also done a bike ride across the Golden Gate Bridge. And I think you can put those together and I think it would be an amazing experience. So you can easily rent bikes in San Francisco. There's bike rental places all over. And if you ride up to the Presidio from Fisherman's Wharf, it's about a 2.5 mile ride. You can tour the museum, and then you're right by the Golden Gate Bridge, and you can ride your bike across it, which is exhilarating and kind of terrifying at the same time. But you can bike across the Golden Gate Bridge and down into Sausalito. Sausalito kind of reminds me of like this Mediterranean seaside town. It's a beautiful town. You can grab a lunch, get on the ferry, and the ferry will take you back to Fisherman's Wharf. And so I've done that bike ride before. It would be about a 10-mile ride. But if you want to experience San Francisco and you want to go to the Walt Disney Family Museum, I think that's a great option. Rent a bike, go across the bridge, go to Sausalito, take the ferry back. You'll go right by Alcatraz, so you'll get to see that pretty up close. It's a great tour to do.
Oh my gosh, you're speaking to my heart, because that is something that's been on my bucket list forever. I've heard about Sausalito and that ferry, and I have never gone across the Golden Gate Bridge. I don't think I've even driven a car across the Golden Gate Bridge. So I think that would be just an amazing way to see just what is a beautiful city.
Yeah, I mean, put your headphones in, listen to the Full House theme song as you go across the bridge, and it's a great time.
The only other thing I would throw out, you might consider if you're a reader at all before going to the museum, you might want to pick up, and I think you touched on this book already, Dave. It's by far my favorite one that I've read as far as Walt Disney's history goes, but it was written by Bob Thomas. It's called Walt Disney, an American Original. I don't want to just push Amazon, but you can find it on Amazon, paperback for $15.99, and the Kindle right now is just $9.99. So I know it's in our public library as well. It's a pretty easy book to find. So that might be something that before you go to the museum, you read about that. I think that will kind of enhance your experience as you go through the museum.
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. It's a good setup for touring the museum, and that I think that biography is regarded as the most accurate and the most well put together that really represents Walt's life.
Yeah, definitely. And it's the other one, I can't remember what it is huge. It's like a gazillion pages, of this one's much.
Yeah, it's an easy read.
Yeah, it's a much
easy read.
It's a much more Steve read, I should say. So, well, I guess as we finish up, Dave, in normal times, which hopefully we're trending towards that, what's next for you and your family, travel-wise, cruising-wise, visiting-wise?
Yeah, well, we were actually in Southern California last March when the pandemic just really started hitting, and we were supposed to have 5 days in Disneyland. So when we went on our cruise in 2019, we bought DVC, and our first DVC experience was going to be staying at the Grand California. And so we made it out. We made it out to California, and we made it to the Grand Californian. But the parks closed basically the day that we got there, and so we decided to stay a couple more days in the hotel to use our points. This was actually, yes, it sucked, but this was actually a really special experience that I'm not sure many people had, because like we had the pool to ourselves when we were there because most people were leaving. And we did a character dining breakfast at, what's the restaurant at Grand California that has characters? Is it Napa Rose?
No, it's not Napa Rose. It's like Storytellers. I was going to say Animators,
yeah.
Pat.
Yeah. So we did a character breakfast at Storytellers Cafe the day that they were closing. And it was us and one other family on the other side of the restaurant. And so every one of the characters came to our table and we played charades together. They were at our table for like 10 minutes. My wife waltzed with Pluto in the lobby of the Grand Californian as I drank a bourbon one night. So it was like there was like no one there, and we got to experience. It's like we had the hotel to ourselves. So that was a cool experience. But we pushed back our trip, and we're scheduled to go again to Disneyland in June, and hopefully it opens up. Hopefully we'll be able to go. If not, we'll find something else to do. But that's our next trip that's planned, is going to Disneyland in June of 2021.
Well, that is just an amazing hotel. It's definitely one of our families. We've only been lucky enough to stay there on points once. It's a tough one to get into. So
it is.
I'm glad that you've got that June vacation booked, and I really hope that works out for you and your family. But it's tough as some of the times have been. There's been a lot of bright moments as well, and I'm glad you guys had that experience.
Yeah, for sure.
So, well, once again, Dave, thank you so much for coming on and helping me out with this. I love this museum. It's probably one of my favorite places I've visited throughout the country. I'm a big history buff, and I know that you are too. So thanks again for coming on and helping me talk about the Walt Disney Family Museum.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve. This has been great.
And all the best to you and your family, and we will hopefully talk to you when you get back from Disneyland in June.
All right, thanks, Steve.
Well, that's going to wrap up our show today. Once again, I really want to thank Dave for coming on and helping me talk about the Walt Disney Family Museum, located at the beautiful Presidio in San Francisco. And how cool is that his daughter's artwork is on too bad it's not there, in actuality, but, to be virtually displayed right now so that everybody can see it. And talking about Small World, what just a poignant kind of conversation and topic to have on display during these times right now. So I know Dave and I would both highly recommend it if you're in the San Francisco area, taking time to visit the Presidio and the Walt Disney Family Museum. You can find out more about the museum online. Just visit waltdisney.org, and I'll make sure that I put a link to it in the show notes as well. Well, if you would like to help us support our show, we thank our Patreon members each and every show. They are the ones that help bring this show to you each and every week. If you would like to be part of that program, you can go over to patreon.com/DCL podcast and find out all the information there. Also, if you'd like to become part of the show, you can reach out to me, Steve, at DCLpodcast.com, and we can get you on and talk a little Run Disney, Adventures by Disney, and of course, our namesake, DCL. Lots of Disney Cruise Line. We always love talking about Disney Cruise Line and just can't wait for the ships to start sailing again. Well, between now and our next show, if you are heading out, you and your family are heading out on your next vacation, staycation, or just, virtually visiting the Walt Disney Family Museum or some other just beautiful place in the world, all of us here at the DCL Podcast, myself, Steve, Christy, and Chris, all of us here wish you just be well, take care of each other out there, and we'll see you next time on the DCL Podcast. The DCL Podcast is not affiliated with the Disney Cruise Line, Walt Disney Company, Adventures by Disney, or Run Disney. All of the opinions expressed on our shows are those of the hosts and the guests who appear on the show. If you have any questions about any of these products, please contact the Walt Disney Company.